A Texan inches closer to the White House. Can Senator Ted Cruz rise above the Republican frontrunner to clinch the GOP nomination? And as the current president faces challenges filling a Supreme Court vacancy, we ask this legal expert if Cruz's own experience with the court wins him support from party leaders. Plus, our political roundtable weighs in on the race from here at home. Patrick Svitek from the Texas Tribune, Bob Garrett from the Dallas Morning News, and KXAN's own Phil Prazen. Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. I'm Josh Hinkle. The field of presidential candidates is dwindling as national conventions approach and parties hone in on their nominees. After big wins on Super Tuesday, including here in Texas, Hillary Clinton has outperformed her rival for the Democratic title. The former Secretary of State has 1,606 delegates, including her superdelegates, compared to Senator Bernie Sanders, who has 851. To become the nominee, a Democratic candidate needs 2,383. On the Republican side, the frontrunner Donald Trump has 673, and the only candidate who comes close, a Texan, Senator Ted Cruz, with 411. The first man to 1,237 should be the party's nominee, but so much is still in the air, like the possibility of going into a convention without a clear winner. Cruz continues to campaign hard, but many might not know just how he got to this point. Still in his first term, Cruz is the junior U.S. Senator from Texas, a polarizing voice among many congressional Republicans. It was a hard fight, though, for that seat, gaining grassroots support in 2012 to best the state's longtime Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst in a Senate runoff. Before that, he'd never held elected office. He was appointed the state's Solicitor General under then Attorney General, now Governor Greg Abbott. In that role, he argued 9 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, and it's a court he's familiar with as he clerked under Chief Justice William Rehnquist. Now, after the death of another justice, the political scales could tip either way on the court. As President Obama's nominee is held up, the decision for a replacement might ultimately fall to the next president. So, could Cruz's Supreme Court experience help him mend fences with the Republican leadership and ultimately win his party's nomination? We asked Professor H.W. Perry, an expert on the court at the University of Texas, this week.
As we all know, Ted Cruz's relationship with the Congress is not a particularly good one. And I'm sure there would be, both within the Republican Party and with the Democrats as well, a lot of jockeying over his power if he got there.
This week, Governor Abbott said that the person who becomes the next Supreme Court justice needs to be a constitutionalist.
He means someone who has close fidelity to the Constitution and doesn't seek to use the law in ways that are pushing at the edges of the Constitution or what he might say an activist judge. But I think everyone would assume that for Supreme Court justice, you'd want someone who cared a great deal about the Constitution.
And I know your path has crossed paths with Ted Cruz at some points. He was an adjunct professor at UT, and you said that you had met him when he was Solicitor General. Do you feel like he is that constitutionalist that Abbott says we need?
I do think that Ted Cruz would probably have a view of constitutional interpretation that would be similar to the governor's. And so from that perspective, I think he would they would probably have similar selection lists for appropriate justices of the court. It's always interesting that when one becomes president or one begins serving different functions, they sometimes really surprise us. It's true of justices, it's true of presidents. So it could well be that if Ted Cruz were elected president, the person he would choose might even not suit the governor.
In your expert opinion, how likely is it that the next president, maybe Ted Cruz, is going to be the one who actually makes this appointment that actually sticks?
I think it's likely, given what the Republicans in the Senate have said. So I do think that whether it's Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, or Bernie Sanders, they're probably going to get to make the appointment. This is a particularly important appointment given the nature of the divide on this current Supreme Court. And if it were to be a Democrat appointing the new justice, it has the possibility of shifting the court greatly in a different direction by one vote. It generates a lot of heat and a lot of discussion that does have political consequences by firing up the bases. But oftentimes it doesn't seem to be one of the most important things that voters use to make their choice.
Can Cruz go all the way? It's something we're asking our political roundtable today. Patrick Svitek from the Texas Tribune, Bob Garrett from the Dallas Morning News, and our own Phil Prazen. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks.
So what's this idea about the GOP establishment wanting Cruz to apologize before they anoint him as the anti-Trump candidate, I guess?
Well, there was a recent report in CNN that suggested that some Republican senators with whom Ted Cruz has not really gotten along with, and which he's kind of proud of not getting along with in some cases, that they'd like him to apologize for calling Mitch McConnell, the Senate leader, a liar several months ago. Ted Cruz, speaking with his campaign, they say that they don't really think he has anything to apologize for, and so if he wants more support from the Senate, I think it's going to have to come probably organically, and there's not going to be any kind of quid pro quo, which is kind of the label that his campaign used.
Yeah, because he said he's not going to get down on his knees and beg for forgiveness
Exactly.
in front of Mitch McConnell, right?
Exactly. I don't know if that's shocking to anyone.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because I don't know if that would actually help him. If a whole bunch of all the senators in Washington all of a sudden go back Ted Cruz, I don't think the voters of the party would say, oh, yes, now I'm going to vote for him and not Donald Trump. This is an anti-establishment party right now with Donald Trump and Ted Cruz getting the majority of the votes in all of these states. I don't think it would help him.
Well, it doesn't really seem to matter to some senators whether he apologizes or not. I mean, we've got Lindsey Graham already kind of giving his support that way, right?
Yeah, on one hand, having this kind of establishment or support from federal elected officials hurts Cruz's anti-establishment brand, but at the same time, he is trying to show that the Republican Party is rallying behind him as the alternative to Trump. And so I think that's the flip side to this coin, and it does show how kind of twisted the political environment has become with Trump being so dominant that you have Ted Cruz, doing some outreach or at least looking for some support within the more establishment wing of the party.